Hey everyone, welcome to the Bread Life channel. Wow, it seems like this is a hot topic. So tonight I have Darren with me. It has a great interest in the topic of free will. And he's not a believer. He's either agnostic or atheist, depending on how your conception. I don't know. Maybe he can explain more about that. But he's knows a lot about this topic. So wanted to bring him in. Welcome, Darren.
Hey, glad to be here.
Yeah, and Darren has written some blog posts on this, and I've linked those in the description. It's on a blog called Buried in Contemplation. And so I encourage you guys to check those out. And the reason that this got brought up is because of last week when I was at the Capturing Christianity conference, Dr. Erica Carlson was there, and she was talking about like how if there is no God, then there is no such thing as free will. Everything is determined. And I posed her question to the audience on her question is, are you okay with that? Now, I was really surprised that a lot of you didn't even fight with the idea of determinism. Most of you just said, yeah, I'm okay with it. Some people even said, like, yeah, it actually helps me feel less guilty about stuff that I've done. And so there was a lot of talk back and forth about this topic. So then I met Darren, and I thought he would be a great person to have on because he would not agree with Dr. Carlson, even though, so anyway, I'm sorry, even though he doesn't believe in free will for the same reason that I do. So Darren, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what your interest in free will is?
So I majored in philosophy, and that as soon as I discovered that was a major topic in metaphysics, I just kind of like fell in love with the issue. And it's like mainly that and philosophy of religion have been my main interest, but more so free will. And I don't know, I find it intrinsically fascinating, and it's like one of those topics that pretty much everyone can have an opinion on because it's like has to do with our everyday experience and how we praise and blame and throw people in jail. So it's something you can engage with almost anyone on. So that's part of what makes it really fun.
Okay, cool. And so, okay, maybe we should start with how do you define free will?
Okay, so I would say the will is the capacity to deliberate, make decisions, and translate those decisions into action. And an exercise of will is free when the agent could have done otherwise. That's under its control. It's kind of wordy, but that's
okay. So part of your definition entails that they could have done otherwise.
Yeah, because I'm not a compatibilist. I'm a libertarian, so it is like the traditional sense of free will.
Okay, cool. So why do you believe in free will?
The main reason is just because it seems to be true, and I endorse an epistemological position where if something seems to be true, then you're justified in believing that's the case in the absence of defeaters. And I don't think there has any adequate defeater that we sometimes act freely. So I feel within my rational rights to go ahead and endorse things how they seem.
Wow, cool. Okay, now there are a lot of people who would strongly assert that determinism is true, and I've heard very strong arguments for determinism. So, can you talk about the arguments for determinism, like the good argument for determinism?
Oh, what was that last part? I missed you.
Well, can you talk about like the good argument or arguments for determinism?
Well, I don't think there are any really good arguments, and I think the arguments usually end up amounting to raw assertion, or they have some sort of contestable assumption that lead them to that conclusion. So, for example, it's like might be with the the reason why in certain sorts of domains of physics that we could have such predictive success is precisely because the laws are deterministic. And so in some areas we can have that good predictive success. And then it kind of just leads, it's like overly applied or generalized, where they say, okay, well, in every instance, every causal sequence in the universe, it's deterministic. But I think it's unjustified to generalize based on just because we can have predicted success in certain domains. And also there's just the problem where there's certain interpretations of quantum mechanics where it's like it seems to be indeterministic. That's debatable, but there's no great reason, I think, to be confident that every causal sequence is deterministic based on what we've observed and can predict.
Okay. Now, I guess at the conference, Dr. Carlson, who's a physicist, presented the idea that like things, if there's no God, then things are operating according to natural law, and therefore all actions are determined. So how do you respond to that, really?
Well, things could be acting according to natural law, but not all laws have to be deterministic. And because even right now, just again, like with quantum mechanics, it's like, yeah, there's evidence that things are acting indeterministically. Plus, I think these involve a particular conception of lawhood, which is, again, contestable. So it's like, what is a law of nature? So originally, the idea of law was applied because laws of nature were divine decrees back in Newton's day. And then over time, usually God isn't a part of the picture when they're thinking about causality. And so therefore it's it used to have to the law itself, if it's actually governing the behavior of the particles in the world, would have to be something like a Platonic form that's enforcing its will on things. But there's other conceptions where it's where there could be a human idea where it's okay, laws of nature are just descriptions of the way things happen, but there actually is no productive capacity within the things and why that happened like that. And then there's another conception of lawhood, which I endorse, which is just the laws of nature are just a different kind of description of the powers of the substances in the world. So that's actually what's grounding the laws of nature. It's not like there's the law of nature acting on the substances. It goes from the world out into a description where, things have these different sort of productive capacities. And then some of the causal behavior involved in these substances can be given law-like generalizations, and sometimes deterministically and sometimes indeterministically. But there's nothing about lawhood itself or any sort of discovery from science that guarantees that traditional idea of lawhood or that everything's deterministic.
Okay, so when you're talking about the substances, are you talking about physical substances that we observe, or are you including other substances that we might not be able to observe, like spirit and that kind of thing?
Well, I'm cool with either one. I'm just mainly thinking of terms of physics and the physical substances, but it would apply across the board as long as a non-physical thing can have all kinds of non-physical properties. It's that might influence the way it behaves or communicates with other things. So yeah, its empowers would be intrinsic to what it is, not a force coming from outside of it.
Okay, cool. And thanks for the questions, guys. I'm trying to keep track of your questions, and now I know how to star them, so I'll keep most of them till the end. This one I'm going to put up right now because it's about what we're talking about. So Jason says, randomness can actually be deterministic. Models can be constructed which deterministically predict random outcomes. So, and this is kind of what Dr. Carlson was saying too, that even randomness is predictable. The randomness that we experience, and that we it's still predictable.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess in terms of, that's why when there is the randomness in say quantum experiments, that's why there's deterministic interpretations of those ones. So it's yeah, and that can often just be constrained about, oh, okay, well, we know it's gonna end up in these locations or have like this amount of like spin on the particle or something like that. So you could have predictive randomness, like knowing it's going to act randomly, or you can predict the constraints and the possible options it might end up. And that could be, again, merely epistemic, just a matter of our lack of knowledge, or it could be that there is actual genuine indeterminism within the constrained randomness that we don't have access to.
Okay. Well, so now when when I start talking with people about determinism, okay, and I have some good philosopher friends that have backed me into a corner on this. So let me just try to reproduce their arguments. And guys, if I mess it up, just forgive me. I'm not perfect at remembering the way that you argue, okay? But basically, they'll be like, okay, you made a decision. Okay, then what, like, let's say, if I, decide to pick up this book, what caused me to pick up the book? And, and so did it have a cause? Was there a cause for me to pick up the book? And then if I say yes, then they say, okay, well, then, there's, whatever caused you to do that is basically like exerting that influence. Well, it's basically like you either have to say that there was a cause, or you have to say it was random, right? Mm-hmm. And so I don't want to say it was random because I had a reason for picking up this book. Right. Yeah. So I had a reason. It wasn't random that I picked up the book. So I have to say I had a reason. And then if they say, okay, then you had a reason, then therefore it had to be.
Uh-huh.
Right.
And So that's a common complaint. And I think how forceful that objection is depends on one's account of free will in general. So, for example, if someone's saying that some people just like define indeterminacy as randomness, and like that's how it usually does apply in scientific experiments because they're working with non-agents. So it's like, yeah, whatever indeterminism will amount to randomness. But I think that's different when someone has the power of discretion when there's an agent around. So, for example, it's like you can, as you said, say it's undetermined that I was going to choose to read instead of watch TV. And so like that's part of the thing too. It's like, say I could really choose, I had dispositions which incline me toward both. And but I also but neither of them could win out, and then I as the agent settle which one I go to. There's a level of description which you could say, we can say, okay, why did you choose the book? And I'll list that. But like where an objection usually comes in was that, okay, yeah, but like, why did you choose the book rather than TV? And I think that's where you're not going to get an explanation. Those are called contrastive explanations, why X rather than the Y. But precisely because it's free, you ultimately can't give an explanation at that level of description. But that's fine because, like, to me, it's like I can tell you why I did something without giving you a contrastive explanation. It's precisely non-random in virtue of the reasons I'm articulating too. So it's like, okay, yeah, maybe it's a little random, but it's like it's not random in the sense of being control undermining. So to me, it's like, okay, that's fine.
Okay, I don't know if I fully understand. Partially, I got distracted by the chat, but So, are you saying could be partially random, and you're okay with that, but there can also be reasons, but that doesn't mean they're determined?
Yeah, it's like no. So like reasons can function as like inclinations, or they can be dispositions to certain sort of act, but they are just causal conditions within you which don't necessarily lead you to one option or the other. If you have something like an overriding reason to do something where you're not motivated with either motivated at all, or there's nothing like an equal competitor, then in that sense, maybe at some level you will be determined to do that. But that's okay. But that doesn't mean every decision you make is going to function like that. Sometimes you can be equally inclined to do different courses of action, or you might be equally indifferent to the ones, and so you just kind of have to pick one. So, but you're still, whatever you're doing, there's still an intelligible description of control, where it's not like there's just a coin being flipped inside your brain.
Right, but if I choose one option over the other, then is okay. Let's say I have two things and they're equal. Okay, I like, pink donut, and I like a strawberry donut, and I like a glazed donut. Okay, I like them equally. So I may choose one over the other. And if it's okay, we could say it's random, or we could say there was a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I could say that I think there's both. It's like there's both be like, for whatever option you choose, you're going like on one level, you're going to choose it because you like the donut, sure. But then they ask, okay, but why did you choose the pink one over the other one? And like, maybe you can't give a fully adequate explanation for that, because if you can give a fully contrastive explanation, those situations are usually going to be deterministic. But just because you can't do that doesn't mean the indeterminacy or random is undermining your control over which one you pick.
Okay, but then what is controlling what I pick?
Just you being the thing that settles which of the courses of action you choose. So this is kind of like partially, this goes together with the kind of account of lawhood and causation I was mentioning earlier, where, so within libertarian accounts, there's typically either event causal or agent causal. And then within an event causal thing, how it usually works is that the explanation for why something happens are events. Events are substances having properties at particular times. In that case, there's more of just agent of informing events, something like having a belief at time t or having a desire at time t, that end up being the explanation for why, for whatever happens. And then in that case, it's like, I think the luck objection does actually have force to it, and because it just seems like there's events flowing through you. But on the alternative idea of causality, where the correct description of causality is substances having certain sorts of powers, then the explanation for why you settled on anything is just going to be the substance itself, your decision. And so you do have indeterministic powers, but ultimately it's why you have control is because there's nothing beyond the substance as a whole that is settling which option is decided.
Okay. Now, you have to understand, Darren, I'm satisfied with your answers, because I don't buy this determinism stuff, okay? I mean, I don't care how good the argument is. It's not my experience, and I'm not going to believe it, right? So,
yeah.
So I'm already with you. So I'm having a hard time arguing against you, but I want to like really get to the heart of what's going on. So, guys, if you can express your reasons for believing determinism better, then please put it in the chat. Okay. So yeah, let's see. Okay, so, and there are some good questions, but I want to stay on this topic. So, okay. Let's see. How can I push this a little bit? Okay. Do you believe that then, like, there's a combination of cause and random, or like, I'm just trying, I want to fully understand this. Like, either, people in the chat are saying either things have a cause or they don't.
Yeah.
So you're saying the cause is you. Is that kind of like the compatibilist view?
No, the cause being you is more of just a consequence of the agent causal description of agent causal description of free will. So, and it's like, yeah, the cause is going to be a multi-factored thing. There's like probably an infinite amount of causes in terms of like what's or causal conditions that are influencing what might happen. It's like, the universe being here, my parents having me, all of the influences I had no control over, my brain functioning correctly. All of those things take part in the description. So it's like, yeah, it has all kinds of causes, but then just at the very end of that big sea of causes, there's also the final settler, which is just my judgment about what I want to do.
But isn't your judgment based on like all of these factors? Like your judgment is based on your previous experience, your disposition, your all these things, like they're all factoring together.
Mm-hmm.
And so your judgment is based on causes.
Yeah, so yeah, for sure. It's like I am at the whim. Like I can't choose to be motivated whatever I want to do. There are just unconscious factors that mainly make certain sort of choices of action either sound appealing or not. So it's like that has to be, and then that I don't have any control over for sure. And so but that doesn't mean there aren't situations in which represented to me are two equally appealing sort of options. And so, and between that, it's like the judgment itself isn't sufficient to actually settle which course of that you go for. And so that's why the final settler just has to be you deciding to pick one.
Okay. All right. That I get that. Okay. So then do you think there are problems with believing in determinism?
It's a fine position to hold. It's like someone could have, so it's like, part of what's motivating me, as I said, was just, I like this certain sort of theory of causality, but other people might have motivations that incline them to endorse a different idea of causality, or just deny causality altogether in the way certain sorts of people do. And so that might lead them to think a deterministic description is the more reasonable one. But I would say the only problem with is just saying determinism is true. And it's like, maybe, but I don't think the issue is settled either way. And so I think you would there needs to be more science, and maybe you need a very specific metaphysics to already end up with that conclusion and be solid with it.
Okay, now in your blog posts, you responded to Sam Harris. Mm-hmm. So can you tell us a little bit about Sam Harris's position and then where you disagreed with him and why?
So yeah, with Harris, one of the big problems is him having these like really hyped up idea of like what free will must be, and then something that's like basically, sure, it's impossible, but it's not a very philosophically interesting version where basically, you can do whatever want and there's no constraints on your behavior. You're free from all of your character and stuff, which is ridiculous. And so like being like, that's a total straw man of what any philosopher is arguing for these days. Maybe he's not trying to argue with the philosopher, he's trying to just combat the common sense idea that maybe we have like maximal control. But yeah, so it's like him being able to demolish that the common sense one just isn't much of a victory to me, because like there's still reasonable cases for what's available. And so, yeah, he kind of has the determined or random thing, and then he has the inadequate definition of free will, and then he also has he uses certain sort of like findings in scientific experiments, but all of the ones he mentions have problems with them and have the things they're tracking as being informative were of what the person might do, they're consistent with them being indicators or like inclinations of what's going to happen. And so there's no reason to think based on that like, oh, everything is determined, but the what do they call it? The readiness potential for particular things being a signal of a future course of action is really just a probability raising factor, not necessarily a causal signal that necessitates you doing something when it is predicted correctly.
Okay. Well, one of the issues that really bothers me about determinism is when people who believe in it also think that there is like any actions that people can be held responsible for, or even that there's any action that's superior to another action. So, like, do you think that, like, if determinism is true, is any sort of like morality or like, a hierarchy of actions possible?
I think so. Yeah, even if like no one actually has free will or is morally responsible for anything. So people needlessly harming other people, I think that's bad, regardless whatever people's control over. It's like maybe moral responsibility or being blameworthy, those sort of evaluations of action aren't going to apply, but like still needless suffering is bad, or that person's a bad person because they cause a lot of harm, even though we can't blame them for it.
Okay, like on what basis can you say that though? Like if determinism is true, like where is your foundation for saying that?
So it's just whatever one it's part of like I don't think like all evaluative descriptions are based on that, because like say if we find out that there's a lot of suffering that happens with say animals eating each other, and that is a bad state of affairs because things being in pain is bad, and it's not, and that evaluation is true right now irregardless of how much control or moral responsibility animals might have over their actions. Most people don't think they are morally responsible for. So goodness and badness is still there, regardless of the moral responsibility factor.
Well, is it though? And this is the part I'm glad you're arguing against this, because then it gives us something to push to challenge each other on, because this is what I keep challenging people on, and no, I don't feel like anybody's given me a sufficient answer, although they think they have. So, like, to me, your answer is just, it's junk. It's like it doesn't, okay, so you're just asserting, well, it's, okay, that it's still good or bad. Well, I don't see how there's a basis for that. Like, if everything had to be the way it is, right? How can we possibly say that anything should have been otherwise? If you're saying something's bad, you're basically implying that it should be otherwise, like it should have been otherwise. But how can you say it should have been otherwise in a determined universe?
Well, this really kind of depends on what your value theory is or what your meta ethics are. And so I don't really have anything really interesting to say. You'd have to actually look at how you think the foundations of ethics works out. And that's really outside of like my area of specialty. So I'm kind of giving you almost a mere assertion of what I already believe. So if you think all morality is somehow a consequence of free actions, then yeah, I'm not going to have anything persuasive to give you. But but that's not the way I think about moral evaluations or whatever. So yeah, I got nothing for you there.
Okay, well, Lena wants to argue with me. So, and she says, I can say that Christians are fascists, for instance, even if they were determined to be so, With power comes responsibility. It's a personal opinion to say that person should have known better. Well, but the thing about determinism, Lena, is that there is no power. There's no power, right? You have no power to do differently. So how can you be using this word power? What is the power? See, the power that you're discussing is the free will that we believe in, right? That's the power. So you can't use that word. But go ahead.
I think you can use power. It's just that people, like, the reason why things happen are a result of the powers that agents do have. They just might only have always one power in any certain circumstance. So they do bring about bad things, and that will be based on what their nature is. But yeah, they don't have the power to do otherwise, and so that might bring down our evaluation's responsibility. But do you know about Frankfurt cases with respect to motivating compatibilism?
No.
Okay, so this is part of what inclines me to think that deterministic actions can, I think there's some force to it, can be morally evaluated. So it's imagine that there's a neuroscientist and some guy who's about to go to the voting booth, and the neuroscientist really wants him to vote for the Democrat or something like that. And so the neuroscientist puts a chip in his brain, and then
you're frozen.
Oh, shit.
Or I am. I don't know.
You're not frozen. Can you hear me? Shit. I'm gonna have to.
Oh. Hi guys. Okay, since let me see. I'm back. I don't know what happened, but I guess my internet was going out, and Darren is back. Hi. I think my internet had a problem. Maybe yours did too.
Yeah.
Not sure. Oh my gosh, I have so many starred comments here, but Lena's arguing with me. Power absolutely exists with determinism. Power is simply the ability to create change. You are hilarious. Power is the ability to create change. That is free will. The ability to create change, the ability to do otherwise, right? Anyway, okay, but go ahead, Darren. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm gonna agree with the commenter there, because yeah.
Really?
Yeah, because yeah. So it's you do have a power, but it's just you're constrained to maybe the expression of one power in a certain circumstance. So the explanation is still your productive capacities. It's that's what's causing the change. It's just there's no power to do any other option. But there still is a power within you that is making the difference of the way things go.
Wait a minute. But so what are you saying is that the source of that power, though? I thought you were on my side, the free will side. You're arguing for the determinist now, but that's great. So,
oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I don't understand where this power is coming from if it's not with the free will that we believe in.
So it's a part of the idea of causality that I talked about earlier. It's the substances in the world that causality are the powers of the substances in the world. So it's just a part of the description. They each object or whatever have different properties, and the properties they have explain why they causally react in particular conditions. So if you want to look at why X did Z in some situation, you're going to, part of the explanation is going to be the nature of that substance. So yeah, it's why did it do that? It's something about the productive capacities of the thing. So even though there was only one option available. But
yeah, so if there's one option available, then can we say that there was power to change?
Like the way the future, like, not there wasn't the power of discretion or like, yeah, there wasn't the power to change its course of behavior other than what it did. But why change happened, why the future unfolded as it did, is explained by the powers of the object.
Okay. So the power to create change just means a change in the environment, not a selection between options.
Yeah. And then, but like, for sure. So that's just at the general description. And then in certain scenarios, if it's indeterministic, then it has a two-way power versus just a one-way power, based on what its nature and causal conditions are.
I didn't understand that. Can you break it down?
Yeah. So it's like, most things, most ordinary objects, whatever like that, when they're in a particular environment, so this mouse, because of its weight and gravity or whatever like that, is the only option for it is to be right where it is. But so that's part of why it has the weight or whatever like that, is just that's a part of its nature as being like a physical object in this in the particular gravity we have. So yeah, that's a power when it does have in it to rest on the table. And then in certain situations, there are two-way powers. Two-way powers could be either, a quark acting indeterministically, where it could go between one slit or another in that experiment, or it could be the two-way power would be like a normal choice of deciding between two things that you might be motivated toward. So one-way power versus two-way power.
Okay. Let's see if there's well, what do you think about compatibilism?
So I think metaphysical compatibilism is a joke that I have no time for, but I think moral compatibilism has something going for it. And that's what I was trying. Metaphysical compatibilism, people who say the possibility of doing otherwise is consistent with determinism. I think that's nonsense. And usually what their conception of ability looks like, well, it's like when you're in a room, like I could either play the piano or not. Those are two powers I have, but like that's to me is no better than just cataloging all of the normal like powers you do have. But in a deterministic scenario, you only have the opportunity to exercise one of your powers. So it's the ability to do otherwise is just not there in the interesting sense. But moral compatibilism is that in certain deterministic scenarios, moral responsibility is consistent with that. Which, and so that's why I was trying to say something about the Frankfurt case, where there's some voters going to the booth, and then there's the neuroscientist who puts the chip in his head, which can, if the guy is going to vote for the wrong party, the chip turns on and makes him vote for the party that the scientist wants to. So, but as it just happens, the guy of his own free will just go ahead and votes for the desired party of the scientist. In that case, he could not have done otherwise, because if there was any signal that was going to happen, the chip would have overridden his brain, and he would have voted for that one anyway. So in some sense, he was determined to go that, but since the actual sequence of events didn't have any sort of like interfering stuff, and it just came from him, then we could still maybe hold someone responsible for that action.
Okay, but what if it went the other way? What if he decide? Okay, so he couldn't have decided to override.
Yeah, so the chip,
because the chip would override if he decided not to do it.
Yeah.
So the chip would override. Okay.
If the chip overrid, then he wouldn't be responsible for the action. It wasn't a morally free choice. But assuming the chip doesn't, as this blocker to any other option, then just because of the way the actual sequence of events unfolded, where he's doing everything totally voluntarily, then it seems like a free choice in some sense.
Okay. But how is that interesting? Because you said the moral compatibilism is interesting. I just think that sounds like, who cares?
To me, like, well, more responsive, like whether people can be blameworthy or praiseworthy for their actions is usually the thing that makes free will the most interesting to a lot of people. And so why that's interesting, because if someone is like if that is a decision that someone could be held for, let's say to make it more explicit, let's say it was, murdering someone, and if the guy didn't murder, if he was going to try to not murder someone and the chip would have came online, then he wouldn't be responsible. But if he just did the murder of his without the chip coming online, then we would normally hold him responsible. And the way that unfolded is it was determined, but so it was determined, so he couldn't do otherwise. But in some sense, it feels like he's blameworthy. So in that sense, yeah, you can be determined and blameworthy, which I think would be interesting.
Okay. So, but the idea of compatibilism being anything but determinism, like in a metaphysical sense, is just something you don't agree with.
Yeah, to me, it's a fantasy game where it's you're trying to say the ability to do otherwise is consistent with determinism, but it's just a word game at that point. It's but if they want to argue that our everyday in that assessments of blameworthiness are still consistent with a sequence being deterministic, it's okay, there's something going for there. I don't have a solid opinion on it, but I think it's I think it's interesting. But yeah, just the other one, it's I think it's stupid.
Okay. So I want to go through some of these comments. There's quite a lot. So, okay, at the beginning, James Apperson said, it's like this is not the comment I wanted from him, but basically his comment that I wanted to put up was something like, determinism is true. There is no other, there's no other option. And now in this one, he's saying it's like disagreeing with someone who says math exists. It's an opinion issue. Facts aren't opinions. So do you think, someone disagreeing with determinism is like disagreeing that math exists?
So I guess in some sense, yeah. So the idea is that the part of why you can still rationally believe in free will is because that precise issue isn't settled. Whether one is a Platonic realist about math or whatever are things people can have different sorts of arguments for. And of course, having an opinion on a issue that hasn't been decisively settled doesn't neither. Yeah, it's you could still be wrong, of course, so it's not a fact. So what I'm trying to say is that people can still rationally disagree and have opinions on an issue that isn't settled. Yeah, it's not for sure just because you can rationally agree with a position doesn't mean you're certain, or it's just a yeah. I don't know if I'm explaining this correctly, but
okay. Well, I guess that kind of brings up this comment, and I will go back to the other comments, but Lance says, I'd like to hear more about why Darren thinks we have free will. So I think you said earlier that it seems to be true.
Mm-hmm.
So
it seems,
what do you have any more to say about that? Yeah.
No. Yeah, it's to me, it's it seems to be true, and there isn't an adequate defeater to render that position unreasonable. So it's sort of to me, it's kind of similar to why do you believe the external world is true, or there are other minds, or the past is real? It's it's like something you don't usually, it's sort of a foundational thing because it's like constitutive of the way you experience and think about everything. So it's like in like maybe there could be some evidence that comes across and like idealism is true, and so I drop that view, and there could be something that comes like there could be total confirmed neuroscientific experiments which shows our actions are determined, but because there's nothing with that force, I think it's still reasonable to believe that the way we experience our own agency is somewhat accurate.
Okay, now that brings up what Lena says here. I've heard Sam Harris talk about a brain study that showed neural activity corresponded to actions before they were taken. And by the way, I have a link in the description to a video that discusses this study. So you guys, I'm ahead of you for once. So, what do you think about that? Do you know which study he's talking about?
So there's 3 different ones that Harris mentions in his book: the Lebet one, the Soon one, and there's another one. I don't know who did it, but so I talk about the blog post. I don't remember everything I said. I wrote it years ago, but with every like the main thing was that whatever they were tracking that was informative of those actions doesn't necessarily end up to determinism, especially like some of them where it's like the accuracy rate of prediction wasn't much over 50%. 50% is kind of like chance. So it's like and so that, and then like so the data is consistent with just tracking preparations to move or preferences or inclinations, whatever like that. And so if you can track those, it's like a lot of times those will be informative. Though, like if you got to predict one way, it's like use that information to go. But that doesn't mean that the neurological signals before are necessitating of it, because sometimes it could go otherwise. Because there's never been like such a thing as like 100% success all the time. That could be again just limits of how good our science is and how complex the brain is, or maybe that lack of success in prediction could be a result that we actually can do otherwise.
Cool. And actually on this point, the reason I found that video is I was looking for another video that I saw a while back of a study that was done where they actually had the subjects, they had the electrodes on their, head and everything, or however they do it. And they were like tracking, they told the person to make one decision, and then after they've made that decision to like change and decide to do the opposite. And I don't know if this is one of the studies you're talking about, but they actually, what they tracked is that in the first decision, there was a brainwave reaction. But when they changed their position and did it, there was no response from the brain. So the researcher was saying, look, I haven't proven free will, but I've proven free won't.
Yeah.
So have you heard of this?
Yeah, that's in the second Lebet study where, because he was the guy who did that. And then that was he was trying to see if you could have the pre-conscious activity without the further decision. And he could. So it's like, so it's like prepare to move and then don't. And so, he got some of the readiness potential shown in the brain, but then, the decision didn't happen because they changed their mind at the last second.
Yeah. And so, but then another interesting idea that comes out of that is, there's like kind of an assumption that that in those studies that it's that your mind is responding to the reaction of the brain. But there are like other ways to think about that, that even before your mind like even before your brain responds, your mind could be doing something else that you're not conscious of. And one of the things that's proposed, and maybe this sounds a bit crazy, but I don't know if you heard of this study, but they noticed that the thinking actually, like the more brain activity actually occurs after the decision is made. And so one researcher's proposal is that you actually you think afterwards, and then you go back in time and you tell your brain what to say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's the post hoc confabulation interpretation or whatever, where like everything has been settled at the unconscious level, and then after that you project a narrative about what happened, which makes it seem like you're free.
Oh wait. Wait, I think you might be saying something different than I'm saying.
Okay.
Can you say that again? More
so I would,
Yeah.
So this is this is what a lot of people say about why so this is usually comes as a negative, like this is why free will isn't real, because the conscious thinking or whatever like that comes after it comes after the fact.
Right.
And so everything's been settled unconsciously. So if it's settled unconsciously, then our conscious reasoning isn't playing the particular role it would have to in order for it to be controlled. And so they say, like, here's this data which shows that you're not actually doing anything like that. It's just it's a narrative you project to yourself after it's been done, that's why you feel like you're free.
Right, but there's this proposal that goes one step further and actually says that what you're doing is that it's saying, like, actually your brain can't even, like, doesn't even have time to respond. And so there's the idea that after you've heard the question, or like if somebody asks you a question, after you've heard the question, you process it. Okay. And that's the brain activity that they're seeing. And then you are somehow sending a signal back in time to your brain to respond. Now, I know that sounds really crazy, but anyway, I just wanted to share that because it's one of the ideas that was thrown out there in the video I watched.
Yeah, you should send that to me, because, like, I don't really have any thoughts about it. I'd have to, like, look more into that. That sounds cool.
Yeah. Okay. So, like, Lance says, it seems to me like we don't have libertarian free will. Can Darren point to any reasons or arguments to resolve this difference? Like, it seems to you we have free will. It seems to him that we don't. So what are the reasons or arguments that, like, would resolve this?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, people have different interpretations of their own experience. If someone doesn't feel like their sense of agency is consistent with that, then I don't have any arguments for that. So, I mean, that's why the way I articulate the position, it's like that someone who does have that experience of freedom is within their epistemic rights to rationally hold the position that they're free. But yeah, someone who doesn't experience that, they don't have any reason to buy what I'm saying. But also, a part of this, I think people can rationally disagree about this.
Cool. Yeah, and it does seem like in some cases people have the desire to do something, but like drug addiction, for example, like that would be one where it seems like people, often have a desire to do something different, but they feel that they don't have the power to carry that out.
Yeah. I mean, I would say it's even more general to that. I think if you do have in all things considered, you're all things considered most motivated to do a particular action, then that's what you're going to do, because it wouldn't really make any sense if you did something otherwise. So I think, like, a lot of actions could be deterministic, based on our own psychology, if you're that strongly motivated to a particular course of action. So, but I don't think all decisions take that shape. So that's why, yeah, I still think freedom is possible.
B.S. Lewis wants to know what's up with the crow.
It's just something like both my friend and my like ex posted on their like Tumblr or something like that. I was like, oh, that looks cool and kind of goofy, and so I just started using that. And I think birds are cool, whatever like that. Is my symbol. So nothing really much to it besides that.
Okay, wait. And he says, "Are you a Jason Lee fan?" I don't know who that is. So
not sure who Jason Lee is.
Okay.
Oh,
go ahead.
Oh, good. No, I was gonna say, is that the guy who played in The Crow, Bruce Lee's son? I never saw The Crow. If that's it.
No, I don't know. So James Apperson says, even one event, no matter how fast or microscopic, happens without a cause, that would be the case of literally something from nothing. What do you think about that?
Well, nothing I articulated today said something about nothing having no cause whatsoever, so don't know what to say.
Okay. I don't understand your answer.
So it's like because I talked about how decisions are caused. You know, there's the infinite number of causal conditions under which your decision happens, and then when you in a situation which you have different motivations or reasonings for doing something, those are part of the causal conditions, and then the ultimate reason, like the ultimate decider of what happens, is the agent itself. So that's a multitude of causes, and then the ultimate settler being you. That all has to do. That all talks about. I've listed a bunch of causes there that are relevant. So what I'm saying is there's nothing I said that says I didn't say to have a free choice means there's no cause. The issue is whether you have a necessitating cause, which is what a deterministic cause is.
Okay. Well, I think there's some pushback on this concept, and maybe this is a good comment to highlight it. Either there's a cause for the actions we take, or there isn't. Either way, how is the fact... okay, this is going on something different, but okay. So you're making a distinction between a necessitating cause and just another like influencing cause.
Yeah.
Okay.
So those would be indeterminate. Yeah, for sure. It's like if I didn't have the motivation in me to pursue the action I would have done, it's like I wouldn't have done it. So that's in a certain sense, that is a cause among many for why a particular course of action is chosen.
Okay. So let's respond to the rest of this. Either way, how is that fact a justification for our punitive justice system? Or worse, an answer to the problem of sin? So do you think we have justification for our punitive justice system? If
no.
Determinism is true?
I mean,
or either way,
even like get the since I think of the control happens on a scale, I don't think the punishment that we apply is totally abhorrent and unjustified. I think this is what my last article is about, and it's has to do with the problem of luck. So your influences and your neurological genetics and basically most of your character are things outside of your control, and they constrain mostly what happens to you, and also your circumstances. And so there's luck involved about what you do. So your level of moral responsibility has to be actually constrained has to be proportioned to the level of control that you have. And unfortunately, I don't think any human being is capable of doing that. Like maybe God could, where like, you know, has perfect knowledge of all the moral facts and all of the causal things that influenced your decision, and then could maybe justly apply a variety of punishment. But since we can't evaluate that, I don't think our criminal justice system could justifiably based on retributive punishment.
Wow. Okay. It sounds like you're almost a determinist though, right? Like it sounds like it's like you're like one step away from determinism, like because you're like, okay, all these influences, and then like even with like the, you know, like the reasons and stuff like that, you're only leaving like a little bit of room for free decision. So
yeah, that might be true in certain circumstances, like in terms of like those really broad things where you're, you know, where you have like overriding decisions. But it's like, you know, me doing this right now, I think that's totally free. There's no reason for why I'm, you know, moving my hand in one direction. So I think that's like still that you have this everyday capacity of kind of choosing things. So like that is free. But then when it comes to assessments of moral responsibility, I think the control, you need something a lot more substantive. And I think there are a lot of something about the causal structure of everything that forms our character that does limit how responsible we are, but that doesn't mean we still aren't able to do otherwise. So I'm limiting it basically what the actual description of free will, which is like the ability to do otherwise. But I think there's just other relevant factors that sort of limit people's level of control and responsibility.
But this is kind of to me, this is a little bit weird. Now, I'm not denying the impact of like, you know, environment and things like that on people, but it just seems a little odd to me that like, I mean, let's just say there's a murderer, and let's keep in mind the murder victim's family is like sitting in the courtroom, and then the murderer tells the judge, you know, like, you know, the judge is like, what do you have to say for yourself? And then the murderer's like, well, considering my environment, I couldn't have done otherwise. Mm-hmm. Is anybody buying that?
So, yeah. So that's the thing. It's like, it doesn't mean that the person had no control. It's like, I think there's this middle ground between, it's hard to know how many free decisions this person did have, which maybe he contributed to the construction of his own character, which made him be like that. But also it's like, yeah, fair enough. But also that doesn't mean like the person deserves no punishment whatsoever. I was mainly responding to the idea about how our particular criminal justice system functions and what those conditions are. So yeah, it's like, it doesn't mean like, oh yeah, you're totally off the hook, you couldn't do otherwise. It just means that given how informative our assessment can be, we should be more restrained in how brutal we punish people. Because it's always better to focus, like, it's way worse to wrongfully harm a person who doesn't deserve it than, you know, maybe not brutalize a person as much as they do. Mm-hmm. Or over brutalize, yeah.
So the writer John Buck would like to know, which libertarian philosopher do you agree with most?
Oh, that's my friend. He was.
Oh yeah! Oh yeah! That's right. Okay, cool.
If I had to pick one, it would be Helen Stewart. She wrote a book called The Metaphysics of Freedom, and she's kind of like known for the position called agency incompatibilism, where she thinks the very idea of like a decision maker itself is incompatible with determinism, but we do make decisions, and so determinism is false. It's like, obviously her case for that gets a lot more explicit, and she's also thinks that non-human animals have free will, which is something I'm inclined toward, given the way I think about how minimal freedom could be. Yeah, like the cat deciding which end of the couch it wants to take a nap on or whatever like that.
Cool. Yeah, I believe in animal free will too.
Oh, cool.
Very cool. So, and maybe even some level of animal morality, but maybe not. I mean, not to the degree of humans, of course, but
Yeah, they do sometimes seem to like feel guilty about stuff. So it's like, they have some.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, like maybe they have moral reasons in some kind of primitive sense.
Okay, so what position would Darren take on foreknowledge if he was a theist?
Oh man, that's really tough. It's like I like open theism, but in terms of a theistic picture, I am more inclined to think of God as in an eternal state rather than like sort of related to time directly, um, which ends up like causing more problems about God, because then there could be maybe God's knowledge about the future. I honestly I don't have an opinion between those two, because there's certain factors about theism which make me attracted toward the position that's more difficult to make consistent with freedom.
Oh, really? Can you
Yeah.
explain that?
So like yeah, it has to do with like between like God's relation to time. So like an open theist is someone who says, well, there are no facts about the future, and so God is still omniscient because God knows everything there is to be known, which doesn't that but it doesn't actually know the future, and so that like God is still omniscient, even though that like we can still have freedom because there's nothing to be predicted or foreknown in the future. But also it's like I think if theism is true, it's like that seems to make like kind of like God more in our world, I guess, in a certain sense, where I would usually be inclined, if I were a theist, to say that God exists eternally, doesn't like time doesn't apply. In I don't think I can articulate, but like that does end up like causing a lot more confusions in terms of God knowing the future.
Okay, so if God knows the future, basically the future is determined, and therefore determinism is true.
Not necessarily. There are. It's like so. Like there's the whole. There are people right now argue. Like I don't understand their arguments yet. They're arguing that even if say eternal, let's say all the temporal facts are settled, then there could still be libertarian free will. And also, it's like there could be the facts are settled, but the relations between like the time slices of the temporal block are still indeterministic with respect to one another. So that means there could be some other reason for why there are facts, which could either or not undermine the sense of actually having power about settling it. Again, like I just don't have any. I don't have any good. I don't have any strong opinions here.
Okay. Yeah. But you think if you believed in God, it might change your thinking about free will?
Yeah, it would depend. It just I guess it's like the sort of like classical theists with like divine simplicity. Like there's something about that picture of theism which ends up being in a case of internalism, which changes its relation to time itself, and there's something about that relation which seems to usually involve it knowing something about the future, or just knowing all. They talk about like God knowing like all the facts. It's like it's not involved in it, like sucked into time, like some people believe, but it's it's outside of it. So it usually ends up being there are like facts about the future. So yeah, if like God knows everything, if eternal is true, then like then also eternalism about time is more plausible, and then eternalism about time ends up usually having there being future facts, and if future facts are there, then maybe we don't have freedom.
Okay. Well, have you ever heard of like the idea that God is not in a timeless state, like he is in time?
Yeah, for sure, and that's why it's like there's the open theist sort of thing where there's no facts about the future, and it's not like in an eternal state, but yeah, it's related
Yeah.
to time in a certain sense. So yeah, that's a fair position.
And it doesn't have to be open theism, though, because I think the person that I'm thinking of is not necessarily an open theist, but he believes that God is in time.
Okay. Yeah, I know like Molinus is a one position that God knows all the counterfactual facts about what could happen, but there's still some sense unsettled. I don't think I understand the position well enough, so I don't have an opinion there.
Okay. Let's see. I'm trying to see if there's any other. Okay, I want to put up this comics. This is kind of this is related to the morality thing, so this is just something I want to respond to. Oh wait, no, this isn't the one. Hold on. So when we were talking about the morality and I was saying like what's the basis of it? And it basically he's saying it's compassion and the rationality of cause and effect because we are compelled to want to live in a safe, healthier, happier world. So we are forced by physics to care how people behave. But then he says it makes sense when a sociopath says we need a justification to care for others, but not really when anyone else says that. Well, I don't think I'm a sociopath. I could be wrong. Okay, I could be wrong. But I do have a very hard time with all you guys who want to have your morality cake and eat it too. You want to say that we're a product of natural processes, right? That just somehow came about. We're basically just cosmic accidents. And yet you want to somehow say that, some things are important, some things are not, some things are good, some things are bad. And you're welcome to have your opinion about that, your opinion. But who cares about your opinion, right? I don't. If I'm a cosmic accident, I don't care what the opinion of another cosmic accident is. I don't care what the opinion of 7 billion cosmic accidents is, right? Because your opinion doesn't matter because all you are is a collection of atoms that just came together in the right way. And then on top of that, if you want to say everything is determined, you're only a bunch of atoms that collected themselves together in a happenstance way. And well, actually, by the physical laws of nature, nothing could be otherwise. So then why complain about rape and murder and all these things? Why complain? It couldn't have been otherwise, guys. So when I say this, it's not because I don't care or I don't have compassion. Of course I do. I'm trying to expose the absolute absurdity of your worldview. Your worldview is absurd. Face it. And now I'll tell you where your morality comes from. You have been created by God and you have compassion because God gave you compassion. So don't say I don't have compassion. All I'm trying to do is argue against the absurdity of your worldview. Okay. End of rant. But Darren, do you want to respond to my rant? Do you agree? I mean, since you don't believe in God, what is your reaction to my rant? Do you have a good argument against it?
I don't think I have anything that's going to be persuasive. It's like, so I am a moral realist, and I am a realist irrespective of how I think about free will. And it kind of depends on what you think our grounds or the truth makers of evaluations are. And so I think some things are intrinsically bad, intrinsically good. And so pain or needless pain is bad. And that's bad irrespective. And so, for example, like a Calvinist might deny free will in virtue of God existing, but they're still realists about morality and stuff. It's like, yeah, people are bad, so they deserve to be punished or whatever like that, even if they don't have free will. I think, yeah, that's absurd because they're not responsible in virtue of like not having free will. But I think it's still totally consistent on their end to be also like, yeah, there's still bad and good making features about the world, even though no one has control over those bad making features. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. Okay, I have to put this up because this is hilarious. My friend Lance is here. He says, "Oh, moral realism alert." He's a anti-moral realist. Very strong position on that. So, anyway, but so you okay. Well, thanks for sharing your thoughts about that. We can get back to the free will. Now, does this even matter? Like, does this matter at all? This whole free will determinism, like, does it matter practically for our lives?
I think so in certain senses. It's like people's evaluation of themselves as having control over their actions has been shown to influence the way people behave. It's like there's been studies where it's like, they might tell them, oh, you have free will. They read it right before, or they're not responsible for anything. And then the people who read the no free will thing end up usually acting poorly or whatever like that. They'll give like extra spicy chips to cause pain to the other participant in the study or something like that. So it could like, oh, do you want to say something?
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. So it does influence that. And it's like, to me, it's like whether we have this sort of capacity is just intrinsically interesting. It's like, it doesn't even matter if it's like practical, but like, to me, it's a very interesting fact about the world if you're intellectually curious about this stuff. And also on the other side, knowing all the facts, in terms of the moral luck issue I brought up, that's important too, because we also don't want to extend like how free people are. So it's like knowing the facts is important to oneself, how they behave, but also how we as a community will respond to people harming others. So yeah, in those sense, it's really practical.
Yes, I agree. This is incredibly important. You guys should not believe this determinism stuff. It is really bad. It's like it's giving basically people permission to do whatever they feel like doing. So, and they do, like you said, the studies kind of show that people are influenced when they think that their actions are determined. They do respond differently. They are more likely to cheat on a test, I think was the study that was done.
Mm-hmm.
So, I just have to tell you guys, man, I'm so glad you guys don't take your own worldview very seriously. Like, at least to me, okay, I know you're all gonna be mad at me for this, but if I took your worldview seriously, oh my gosh, this like you just be glad you don't know me, okay? But you guys, thankfully, you seem to overcome these bad ideas and still live moral lives, and I'm just wow, that's good. So I know they're just like breaking out, but anyway, okay. What have we not talked about with regard to this? Like, what are any arguments for or against that we haven't touched on?
I think so. Like one issue that's really relevant. So for example, one might be motivated to take, say, the theism position in terms of like that maybe raising the probability of free will, precisely because only God can provide the necessary conditions to make people free. And some people think that like requires something like dualism, and because dualism would unconstrain us from, or in some sense make us sovereign from the normal chain of causality, and so that's how you get outside of it. And so it's like that'd be one thing, but also I want to say in terms of the non-necessity of theism, it's like there are people who are dualists who even who are dualists while also being atheists. And also, it's like I think you just need a sense of composition or whatever of complex objects where they are legitimate new objects in the world that can have a power as a whole. So this could involve either something like strong emergence or something like hylomorphic dualism, which is like the Aristotelian Aquinas' sort of view on things. And so that's how you make sense of things being able to being a proper object as a whole, and not just an aggregate of atoms where all the powers are really in the atoms. Like, it's like, no, there's actually a new whole that comes together which has its own set of powers. And so that's why it's not, in sense, not mere randomness or determinism in with agents.
Okay. I want to pretend that I understood all of that, but I didn't. So do you have a way to explain it in a more like simplified terms?
Yeah, let me try. So it's like in terms of like the strong emergence position I'm inclined toward, it's how new objects are picked out by having causal powers that aren't just the mere aggregate of its constituents. So
wait, hold up. Let's break that one down.
Okay, cool. No, totally.
Objects. So, what objects are we talking about?
I'll give it. Let's take the example of a water molecule. So I think that is like, so if you're gonna take an inventory of what exists, water molecules are gonna make a contribution to that list, because it's not just the mere two hydrogen and oxygen coming together. It's like before, like in combination, they create a new thing because they have, like, you take oxygen and hydrogen by themselves. It's like they freeze at like radically different temperatures, and they're how they react to fire is like radically different too. So the kind of causal powers that water has as a new molecule is vastly different than what they have in isolation. So that's different than, say, like a pile of dirt. It's like if you just keep on piling dirt together, the powers that the dirt has is just a matter of whatever the sort of mineral formations and dust and stuff that makes up what dirt is, like that. That's just aggregates of things, like how much it can like weigh and how it will respond to its environment, versus like in the case of certain sort of chemical composition or organisms, they have powers that are novel from what their constituents are. And so that's part of what makes them a unique thing in terms of what it can causally contribute to the world.
Okay. All right. I think I get the idea. Okay. Anything else that we didn't touch on?
I think I mostly got in, what I have to say. So anything I have.
Do you feel like are you actively trying to convince determinists not to be determinists? Like, do you think, or do you feel like, I'm satisfied with my free will position, but I don't really care if other people believe determinism?
Yeah, I'm not really a free will evangelist. If I happen to be in if I'm around someone who's determinism, who believes in determinism, it's like I'll go back and forth and argue about it with. It's a lot of fun. But it's some people, there might be certain other parts of that person's worldview which is like I can't argue against or whatever. It's like I'll try to give them my case otherwise, but if they want to keep on being determinist, it's like, yeah, go for it, buddy. It doesn't really matter to me.
Okay, cool. And among your friends that I met, are there any of them that are determinists?
No, it's like, so like both John and I are libertarians, and I think Alex might be too. And then Emerson, he's a compatibilist but not a determinist. So kind of like he's unsettled about whether determinism is true, but he does think free will is consistent with determinism, which that is someone I continue to argue with. So it's like, yeah, there are people like that, which I still try to convince sometimes.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on tonight. This has been really fun.
Yeah, thanks for
And
having me.
yeah, and if anybody wants to read Darren's blog posts, please do. They are in the link. The links are in the description of the video. Thank you for all of your comments tonight, and hope everyone has a good night.